Regular meeting is called to order at 6 p.m. Will the Vice Mayor please lead us in the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance?
Tonight, I'd like to have a moment of silence for all our family and friends that suffered the tragedy of the hurricane. So if we could just do a moment of silence for them tonight. Thank you. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the City Clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Black,
Present.
Vice Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Douther.
Present.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve it?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? No. Will the City Clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Douther,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges,
Yes.
Commissioner Andrews.
Yes.
Mayor Black.
Yes. Next, we have public comment. Public comment is encouraged. Right now, the public comment is for anything that is not on the agenda. You'll have an opportunity to speak on anything on the agenda when that item comes up. Remember, your time is limited to 3 minutes. Please step up to the podium, state your name and address, and please remember to be civil and respectful.
We're not doing the proclamation and the presentation?
There are none.
Okay.
Chuck Lambert, 565 Crystal Drive, Madeira Beach. Topic of discussion is Crystal Island road improvements. It's been close to probably 2 months since we've received the money for the road improvements. It's in the bank. And I'd like to find out why we have not gone out for any requests for quote for the work to be done. It still hasn't gone out. We had targeted January as a commencement for the road work. And yeah, that time's going to go pretty fast. By the time we get the request for a quote out, we review them, you guys approve them, I think we're going to miss the target date, but I want to know why we're not out there for a quote. Thank you.
My name is John Apache. I have 4775 Cove Circle, and I'm representing C Tires, in which I have some other people with me.
Okay,
Let him-
yay, yours.
My concern is that I understand there is a law that says no right to stop anchorage in navigable waters unless it is a derelict vessel.
Excuse me.
Pardon?
This is a time to speak about anything that's not on the agenda. When that item comes up, you can come back and speak about it.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you. Anybody else who's not at Sea Towers who wants to speak? I guess not. All right, then, public comment is now closed. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Somebody like to make a motion to approve it?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Andrews.
Yes.
Commissioner Douther,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges,
Yes.
Mayor Black.
Yes. Next item is ordinance 2019-18.
Will the clerk read the ordinance, please?
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2019-18, an ordinance of the City of Madeira Beach, Florida, amending land development regulations, Division 5-C-1, Tourist Commercial, Section 110-259, Special Exception Uses, to allow parking facilities as a principal use, providing for severability, providing for the recognition of state preemption, and providing for an effective date.
Madam Mayor, Jerry Murphy for the record. This is a kind of cleanup ordinance to allow for parking by special exception in the commercial district. You have a memorandum in your packet from the Planning Commission regarding this change, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
You said there was a memorandum in our packet. I do not have one.
It should be right in front of the ordinance.
Page 57.
Okay, just normal, okay. I'd like to kind of hear from the Planning Commission why they're recommending approval on this, please.
Hi, my name's Mike. Mike with the Planning Commission, Chairman, and we basically went along with the city recommendation, the staff, on this one. If I'm not mistaken, we didn't address this last night. It was our previous meeting, and unfortunately, I wasn't at that meeting. But what they approved was the city recommendation.
Thank you.
Any discussion from the board? I'll open this up for public comment right now. Public comment is closed. Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-18 on second reading.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Andrews?
Yes.
Commissioner Douthat?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges?
Yes.
Mayor Black?
Yes. Lost my place, I'm sorry. 61-07. Next item is ordinance 2019-07.
Ordinance number 2019-07, an ordinance of the City of Madeira Beach amending Division 10 Plan Development, Section 110-386, Purpose of Plan Development, PD, District Strengthening Purpose and Intent, Section 110-387, Uses Permitted, Addressing Compatibility and Setting Standards for Mixed Uses, Section 110-388, Application for PD Zoning, Specifying Submission Requirements and Design Criteria, Section 110-389, Procedure for Approval of PD Zoning, Adding Specific Procedures for Review, Section 110-391, Review by Local Planning Agency, Specifying Responsibilities and Specifying Review Criteria, Section 110-392, Neighborhood Information Meeting, Providing for Severability, Providing for Conflict, Providing for an Immediate Effective Date.
Thank you. I'd just like to start off saying there's some conflict here. Page 62 starts off saying ordinance 2019-20, but on the front it says 2019-7.
They had a typo there, and it was corrected today.
Which is which?
It's 07.
It is 0.
As read, yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I recommend that we send this back. There's so many errors in there. There's so many different things, conflicts in there. They talk about massing. I have no idea what the heck massing is, and I cannot find it anyplace. It says, you know, that if, it doesn't specify, like, it says things like, you know, if they give this, then we're going to give an extra 4. But what is this? I mean, is it an inch? Is it a mile? There's nobody explaining. This does not explain what this is. You know, there's just too many conflicts in this whole thing, and I think it needs to, I cannot vote for it the way it is right now. I think it needs to go back to the Planning Commission and kind of, you know, grammatical errors in it. There's just all kind of different things in it. And then someone looked it up on, I think it's called the Flesh Report, to see what level it's written at. It's written so far above a master's. You'd have to have a doctorate degree to kind of understand some of this stuff. I'm reading it and I'm going, what the heck are they talking about? It's like, I think they need to bring it down so the average person understands. I think they need to rewrite this in that aspect.
Well, I do agree with you. Also, they talk about density, intensity, and massing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what intensity is either in reference to buildings. There are a couple of things I'd like to mention, though. But like you said, there are errors. I'll point out one on page 63. The second paragraph down is not completed. It just says it doesn't come to an end.
That's one of them, yes.
Yes. What was the other one? Oh, page 67, the second line down, it talks about the notices for the meetings. It says 200 feet, and I thought we said 300 feet. Is that correct?
Say it again, please.
Instead of 200 feet distance for neighborhood meetings, we said it should be 300 feet.
I thought we had one higher than that.
I think we wanted higher, but I think
Yeah,
that's,
I thought we said 500 is what I thought we said.
that's what we wanted. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
yes,
what we asked for.
right,
So like I said, the way it's written right now,
right.
I cannot say yes on this.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, if I may. Julia Mandel, Special Land Use Council. As you may recall, we did have some meetings regarding this, and I hear there's a couple of different issues that you're raising. One relates to maybe some omissions from the ordinance, where the omission was stated on page 63, where there's a blank in furtherance of. It should be in furtherance of the comprehensive plan. That's a non-substantive change that we could make between first and second reading. Notwithstanding that, I know you just raised an issue about the number of feet for notice. That's not subject to change in this ordinance, but if I could, I'll just kind of give a brief overview as we discussed. The purpose behind this ordinance was directly related to making it clear what the PD submission requirements were because of a court case that had previously been settled against the city, under which there was a court determination that the way our PD provisions were written, that it was requiring things to be submitted at the application stage that were impossibilities. And as I've said during our meetings, and I would reiterate today, that has the potential to create some legal challenges with certain outstanding applications and maybe pending applications in the future, depending on what way you want to go in this. The only other change that's really significant in this was to have a limitation on height put into your PD requirements that doesn't exist today. My recollection is it was 6 stories. That would be something that would be put within your PD ordinance, so that way the consideration of anything over 6 stories couldn't be done in the PD process. The remainder, as it relates to the how you determine a PD and what provisions you're looking at, those are left for a specific PD review process. But this would just simply be reiterating the types of items that are needed at the submission stage so that you can actually get an application so you can hear. I would recommend if there's either other portions of your PD process that you're not comfortable with, such as the way you do your notice and other things, that shouldn't be the subject of this ordinance, because we do have pending applications that really do pose some challenges that we need to deal with, as we discussed in our meetings. So I would recommend that we move forward with the ordinance as is. We can make that one change between first and second reading, and although it is an omission, and obviously there's a couple of typos, those are changes that can be made between first and second reading, so that when you come back at your second reading, those blanks will be filled in and the ordinance number will be changed to 07.
Julie, you're absolutely correct. We had a meeting, it was you and Mr. Brooks and Linda and the city manager, and I think each one of us individually.
That's
But we
correct.
did not have a copy of the ordinance in front of us at that time. We listened to what you guys had said. We did not have a copy of this ordinance, so once I got the copy of the ordinance and read it, it's like, I'm lost. I mean, so many things in here do not make sense to me. So, you know, like I said, what's massing? It has no idea. Things are not defined on what it is, and I think it needs to go back and these things need to be defined before I know I can vote yes on it.
And I understand that this is the exact same ordinance that was brought to you in a workshop previously, I think it was in May, and this is the same ordinance that was given to you at the meeting. And I exactly understand what you're saying about some of the terms being defined. It's not that those terms don't exist in your code, they're just being moved from one section of the code to the other section of the code, so that we have, for the purposes of submission, what information is necessary. So that's why I'm saying, I think the better approach per our conversations would be to go ahead and move this ordinance forward to at least allow the submission part to be remedied. And then you seek a workshop or some other item under which you can discuss. Maybe you want to tighten up what your processes are. Maybe you want to, deal with PDs in a different way. That's certainly within your bailiwick. This is simply managing an issue as it relates to the glitch in your code as it relates to submission of PDs.
Well, I would like to say that personally, I really don't like PDs because I think the city doesn't need that. If you can build according to the code, go ahead and build it. Don't make special exemptions to tall buildings in our city. And the biggest problem I see in here is on page 63, it talks about averaging. And if you average, it's not going to fit the sense of our city. And further to that point, at a workshop on November 27th, 2018, we said, what it says here, the board consented to staff bringing back the proposed ordinance to include a height restriction of a total of 5 stories. So with that not being in it, I don't know how I could approve it.
Did you all hear that?
I apologize. Yes, I did hear that. And when we discussed this with you, we showed how that was supposed to all work, and that was part of the document that was in your packet through the workshop. Now revisiting what I'm seeing in this section 110-386 and the underlined materials, I was thinking there was only one part that was missing. There does appear to be a second part that was missing, and somehow that got left out of what's in front of you today. It was presented to you when we met. It was presented at the workshop. We can go forward, but if that has been left out of this particular ordinance on first reading, the only other suggestion I can make is that we go ahead and continue first reading to your next regular meeting. We'll get you that full information, or I can read it out into the record and you can add it between first and second reading. The massing and scale directly relates to the height and the keeping of the height at a maximum of 6 stories. Which,
I know what it means.
yeah, it's supposed to be able to be averaged, so if you are between 2 buildings that are not 6 stories, it's not like you get 6 stories. If you're between 2 buildings that are 4 stories, you can only go up to that 4 stories, and also
All right,
the mass.
this was explained to me. There are 2 buildings at 154th. And it was explained to me if we use the averaging between those buildings, you could put a 6-story building
At a maximum.
at a max.
Even if you have 2 buildings that are taller, which is exactly what this
That's
intent
exactly what it
is.
is, and I just don't think that fits the tone of our city.
Meaning you think the 6 is too high?
Oh, yeah.
So what I hear you saying is the idea of having buildings over a certain height as a general rule.
Well, that's what we said. We didn't want them over 5 stories.
So it's the six, I mean, I'm just trying to understand where your concern is. It's the
the
6
concern is
stories or the
because-
5 stories?
The concern is because the averaging will allow you to build higher than 5 stories.
Okay. That is new part of this code. So if that is something you have a concern with, then you might want to make a motion to not move forward with this ordinance as is with that provision and to have that change to 5 stories. That is also a change that could be made between first and second reading. We can do that now. Again, my concern is if we wait on this too long, some of these other issues that relates to PD's applications moving forward, we're continuing to push those further and further behind, and I have some legal concerns with that. So I would be more inclined to either try and make that change between first and second reading, or somehow be able to bring that back to you in a quick manner so that we can at least get the other things dealt with.
Julianne, could you just verify one thing for me? We talked about the height being 6 stories. Now, would that be over parking? Would you include the parking in that?
It's from, I believe it's from base flood elevation is where it's measured. So whether or not your base flood elevation is raised as a result of parking or not would be depending on your particular site. And you can go under, for base flood elevation, you can go under, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding. You can sometimes go under with your base flood elevation as it relates to parking. So you could potentially, there's a potential for it depending on where you are.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a couple of quick questions. First off, I don't like getting sued, and I don't think anybody in this room should like getting sued. But if I'm not mistaken, from the meetings I had with you guys, this is to clean up a glitch
Correct.
that has caused us to get sued in the past, okay? Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely a correct assessment of it.
Okay, and if you could throw a dollar figure at it, how much did this glitch cost us? If we had this written the way you want us to write it right now, we would have prevented a lawsuit that cost the city how much?
The best way I can describe it is on your Pinellas County courts are not afraid to have large verdicts against local government. And I think one of the examples I used was a recent case between against Pinellas County and the City of Safety Harbor that the court found a $16 million verdict for. It was for a faulty denial, but it was also inclusive of attorney's fees over and above that $16 million. If you were, I don't want to be too overt on the record because I don't like to explain to people how to sue my client, but you have to be concerned that people who are sitting here waiting because of a glitch that we've known about for a period of time, that the more time they're waiting, the more they're not even able to get, quote, their day in court in front of you, because you have a right to turn down whatever project you feel is not an appropriate project, but we're telling folks they can't even really get in the door. And so there's a potential for a court to say, you've taken so much time, you've caused either a diminution in value of a property or what they call a temporary taking. I'm not saying they'd win. I would never say they would win. There's fair arguments all the way around. But from my perspective, your best course of action is to not take on litigation on really fixing what is a glitch, which is taking the criteria that you need for a submission out of your other section of code and putting it into this section of code. The height section is a new section. That was put in there because right now your PD criteria have no height limitation on them, which means you would still have the right to weigh the information, but it didn't put anything in the code that allowed you to have something to weigh it against. The intent of that particular section that I'm hearing the issues on is whether or not 6 feet is right, should it be 5 feet, what does that mean? And if that is something you're really concerned about at this moment, I would request that we go ahead and deal with that issue by removing that section so we can move forward with an ordinance today that fixes the glitch. But keep in mind, if you do that, you don't have a height limitation in your ordinance,
Well,
right?
we still don't, right?
You don't have one today.
Right, so why would we be, I mean, isn't it, and I'm going to sound naive here, but I'm the new guy, so I'm allowed to. Isn't a supermajority needed for the changing of the PD?
We have to analyze that issue. We haven't had the chance to analyze what the process would be once someone gets to a PD and whether the charter amendment that was passed on pending applications would be something that those would be bound to or not. And I hate to give a legal opinion when I know your city attorney really should be weighing in on that, and I
Okay.
haven't really analyzed that with him.
Well, I mean, I think we're never going to get anything accomplished as far as height today. That's not going to happen. But I would like to fix the glitch. So can we take out whatever, and we can add that in second reading, or I don't know. We could have a different discussion at a workshop about it. But I'd like to push this along to get rid of this glitch that is, I mean, because the next project that comes through, the same person that sued us before is going to sue us again, and they're going to win on the same criteria. So I'd rather just get rid of this glitch now and keep moving. And we can also address, we can, at the next workshop, Mr. City Manager, can we throw this on the agenda and we can chat it through?
Yes, I think the advice that you're getting is just as long as we can keep moving
Let's
this,
keep pushing
you
it
know,
through, and then we
maybe
can
doing
work
a
this
special
out.
workshop
Right.
meeting or a special meeting to make sure that we're being proactive to modify that change because it's taken us so long to do it at this step.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
If that's the way the commission would like to go, if I could take a moment and talk with the city attorney just to make sure we're on the same page as to whether or not we can remove that section and reread this title so that we make sure we're reading a title that doesn't have within the body of the title that particular section. Maybe you want to
Well, I
move
think
on.
we've only heard from one commissioner. Could you read the sentence that Linda Portell recommended regarding height? For some reason, it did not make it into the section 110-386 in your packet.
I'm going to read that whole section because I think for the purposes of the record, it would be easier to do that.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, though, that there's a sentence that has a maximum of 6 stories.
Yes.
That got left out. I think I heard the mayor say that she'd like that 6 to be a 5. We've also heard a commissioner say that he'd like to get rid of the entire section and move forward. So if you could read what Linda had, then there could be a motion to delete that section in its entirety or a motion to amend that section to say 5 stories, and you could see how the votes come out. You do not need a supermajority vote to amend the zoning code, even though it's dealing with PD. You would only need a supermajority vote to approve an individual PD application. So here we're just coming up with the standards or criteria. 3 votes is all it would take to pass. I know there's only 4 of you here today, so you would still need 3 votes, which would be a supermajority of today, but you need 3 votes to move it to second reading. You could also schedule it for a workshop in between first and second reading as another alternative, or you could continue the first reading. So you would have 2 first readings and then move on to a second reading. But you do have 4, so you'll need at least 3 to make a decision as to what you want to do today.
I can just read the one section, but I kind of feel like it needs the context.
You can read the
of entire
whole thing. I
section.
just want them to know
Yeah.
the part that's going to be different is in the middle where they talk about 6 stories. And that could be changed to 5 if there was such a motion and the motion were to carry.
For the purposes of the record, this is the section, how it should read, and was, the section is given to you previously, and just for some reason was not placed in the ordinance in front of you with all of the verbiage. In keeping with the stated intent of the comprehensive plan and in furtherance of the historic and desired low-intensity character of the community, PD development shall be allowed a minimum of the design criteria set for the underlying zoning, or may, at a maximum, be designed to reflect the average intensity, height, and massing of the development pattern on surrounding property of similar zoning and use, and may be built to a maximum of 6 stories where the project is demonstrated as necessary to meet the clearly stated intent of the comprehensive plan and to meet clearly defined public purpose. And I'm not going to read the rest of it except at the very end, in a furtherance of the comprehensive plan, which is clearly missing words. So the intent of this section, as we discussed both in the workshop we had in May and also in our meetings, was that you always have the right through a PD process to ask what you can get on your underlying zoning, which I understand for most zoning districts is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 stories. Maybe some it's only 2 stories. But that if you come in for a PD, the maximum height you could ask for to be able to achieve is 6 stories if, taking the average of the surrounding properties, the average is above 6 stories or is 6 stories. So if the average surrounded view is 5 stories, you can only get 5 stories. If the average surrounding view is 4 stories, you can only get 4 stories. But the most you could ever achieve is 6 stories. So that's the intent of this section. And the city attorney, Mr. Brooks, described your options in terms of making a motion. And for the purpose of the record, I've now added that into the record.
Well, at this point, I'd like to open this up for public comment. Yes.
Robert Preston, 425 South Bayshore Drive, Madeira Beach. Two of you up there have already cost the city loads and loads of money. It is recommended by the attorneys to keep the city safe to move forward with this for a reason, so that we don't get sued again. And the other comment that you made earlier, Mayor, was that it doesn't fit the sense of our city, which is strange coming from two of you up there that live in buildings that are higher than 5 stories. So that seems it's okay. But I find it interesting that you continue to want to impede improvements in the city, and true improvements in the city. And that's really disturbing. And it's apparent in the last election that things are chipping away, and it's your opinion of the sense of our city is changing. Thank you.
Doreen Moore, 13019 Boca Ciega Avenue. Just a couple of comments. I think you all, as a board, have worked very hard to get to this point. We have hired, I think, the professionals. They're giving you guidance. I have to say that I agree that there are a lot of errors here. There are a lot of things that need to be cleaned up, but you're working in the right direction. And I can understand that you're still seeking advice and still having a better understanding of what all of these terms mean, and that's why you've hired these people to give you advice. But I think you need to move forward. You need to clean up. As Commissioner Andrews has pointed out, you've got errors there. You need to keep the whole machine moving. Make these corrections. Allow these things to come forward, and then make your additional tweaks as you go along. There are things that need to be addressed in the planning process, the whole PD process. Maybe you should be considering a minimum size requirement. Maybe that would be something that would be looking at an overall size rather than some of these individual height or whatever. But I think you need to clean up what you have now so we can continue to have the progress that's out there. Nobody wants to be sued, and I think you're taking the right steps to make these things happen. And the developments that are out there need to move forward. I don't have a dog in the fight, but I want to see things be properly organized and properly vetted, and you need to make these changes to correct the glitches. And if I could just digress a minute and point out that on the agenda, under new business, ordinance 2019-07 is not parking. You've got it under A as parking. It should be changed. And also, another quick note, kind of going back on 2019-18, you're referring to section 110-259 special exception uses to the Board of Adjustment. We don't have a Board of Adjustment. I think you just approved that. and your ad copy also would probably have that, so whatever you need to do to kind of clean that up, because we don't have a Board of Adjustment. So, thank you, and I hope you consider moving forward.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Public comment is now closed.
You know, I'd just like to say that I can vote yes on this if we're going to bring it back to the workshop and correct some of these problems. And, gotta stop, okay. And errors that are in here, because right now, you know, and Julie, I think this needs, you know, this is written way above a master's degree. I think it needs to be dumbed down a little bit. I mean, bring it down to my level so I can read it, okay? And so the average resident can read this, and that it makes sense to them. You know, right now, you know, it's just very, very hard to read and to understand. So I think that's the two things we need to look at for the workshop is, you know, when we're talking about, if they give some, then we're going to give some. But what do we get? How much are we giving in order to give them something? I mean, it's not explaining any of those things in there. And I think those things we need to look at the workshop, along with these grammatical errors.
Understood.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to pass ordinance 2019-07 on first reading with the intent of bringing it up again at the September workshop.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Discussion from the board? Will City Clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Andrews?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges?
Yes.
Commissioner Douthat?
Yes.
Mayor Black?
Yes. Next item is ordinance 2019-20. City Clerk?
Ordinance number 2019-20. First reading of an amendment to City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinances, Land Development Regulations, Article 7, Off-Street Parking and Loading, Section 110-953, Maintenance, Section 110-955, Methods of Providing Required Parking, Section 110-956, Shared Parking Facilities, Division 2, Off-Street Parking Spaces, Section 110-971, Number of Spaces, Section 110-973, Off-Street Parking Space Standards, Regular Car Off-Street Parking Layout, adding Section 110-974, Valet Parking, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Madam Mayor, for the record, Jerry Murphy. This is an ordinance basically to clean up some problems with the parking ordinance. You have a memorandum from Linda Portell and myself. Basically, the code currently doesn't address motorcycle parking, tandem parking, or valet parking, and there are no parking requirements, or they're unclear what the parking requirements are for mixed use. And so this ordinance is intended to address those concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? No? Okay. I'll open this up for public comment on this item. Public comment is closed.
Make a motion for ordinance 2019-20, amendment to parking code, parking lot design, first reading.
I'll second it.
Will City Clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Douthat?
Yes.
Commissioner Andrews?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges?
Yes.
Mayor Black?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is ordinance 2019-21. City Clerk.
First reading of amendment to City of Madeira Beach Code of Ordinances, Chapter 78, Waterways, Article 1, Section 78-1, Containers and/or bottles prohibited on public beaches, Section 78-2, Fishing prohibited, Section 78-3, swimming and spearfishing, prohibited in certain areas, Section 78-4, restricted swimming areas established, Article 2, boats, Division 1, generally, Section 78-31, adoption of state boating regulations, Section 78-32, definitions, Section 78-33, speed restrictions on watercraft in specific areas, Section 78-34, congested marine areas, Section 78-35, water skiing regulations generally, Section 78-36, docking limitations, Section 78-37, discharge of sewage from vessels into city waters, Section 78-38, slow speed, minimum wake and idle speed, no wake zones and informational markers, Section 78-39, airboats declared a nuisance operation prohibited, Section 78-40, restrictions on use of public property, Division 2, liveaboard vessels, Section 78-61, general regulations, Section 78-62, permit requirements, Section 78-63, marinas, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Madam Mayor, this is, as I think a lot of people are aware of, this was a concern right from the get-go when I started here in July, and that's when we started doing some research on it and worked with the Sheriff's Office. Subsequent to that, we did the workshop meeting where the Sheriff's Office was here and talked about their enforcement activities and the fact that they thought that this was an ordinance that was similar to the other ordinances that Treasure Island has passed and Gulfport has passed, and some of those jurisdictions, we had liveaboards that kind of moved to our jurisdiction because of that. Basically, they're in agreement to go ahead and enforce our ordinance once we pass it. And it's the major parts of the ordinance are there's a requirement that they would have to check in at our marina to get a permit. There's a minimal charge of $5 to do the paperwork on the permit. They would get a permit after they pump out, because one of the big issues is sanitation of our waterways. So after they would pump out, everybody would be required to pump out at the marina when they get their permit. Then they have, the permit's good for 72 hours, and after such time, then they would have to move along on their journey to wherever they're headed, and they can come back a month later, go through the same process, requesting a permit, pumping out, and having 72 hours on their way back, if that's what they choose to do. Other restrictions are they can't anchor any closer than 200 feet to a seawall or land dock, whatever. The other provision is they cannot vacate the vessel for more than 8 hours. So that is to give the Sheriff's Office some teeth to enforce abandoned vessels and move forward with their process. There's also some individuals that have been renting out Airbnb type vessels out there. And obviously, you know, that's puts too much of an impact on our environment and on our waterways. So that's why we have this prepared for you for your first reading, and we'll move through once we move through this hurdle on further through our next meeting.
Thank you. Well, judging from the crowd here, I think we should open it for public comment now. Would you like to go first? Yes.
Thank you. You said a lot. They're all really good. John Apache, let's see. John Apache, 4775 Cove Circle, Sea Towers. I understand that there is no right to stop over anchorage and navigable waters unless they are derelict vessels, leaking fuel, or otherwise a nuisance vessels. Well, we have nuisance. We have a situation where they're constantly dumping their trash out. We have to pay somebody constantly to pick up the trash on a regular basis. Also, they have the sewage that's going out. I have complaints that the sewage just lays on top of the water. I understand there's also a law that you have to be out 20-some miles out in the ocean before you can dump. And here, they're just dumping all our sewage in here. Generators run all night long as a nuisance, all night long. I had to call the sheriff's department because the lady was in back of the boat showering in the nude. Then I had to call the sheriff's department, and I sent a video of them dumping buckets of brown stuff off the side of the boat. They came out and gave him a citation. She's still there. We have 6 boats over there. 3 of them live on their boats, so we know that they're living there. And I now see that you have 7 boats over here, and I see dinghies behind it, so meaning that they're living on it too. So you're going to start experience the same thing we experience over at Sea Towers. We have 3 times boats have broke loose because of storm. One of them almost ruined our bridge. It goes over our lagoon. The second one came into our dock, almost hit our dock, and the third came up to our sea tire. I also see that you have a nice dock over here too, so sooner or later, the boat might break loose and hit your nice docks. So I think what it boils down to is that we're so concerned. Oh, the other thing is that we own the land from the edge of Sea Towers all the way over to the American Legion. We own the land under the water. And I understand that some of these people are renting those boats, so they're collecting rent, plus they're anchoring on our property. So it doesn't seem fair for that. And the main thing is we don't want this to turn into Los Angeles. But Los Angeles started with couple tents on the sidewalk. Now we did just about a month ago, we had about 8 boats. Now we're up to 13. So when it become 25, 50 boats, and it's going to be terrible. And it's just extra expense for us to keep picking up all the trash and being concerned about the environment, because it has to be affecting the plants, the fish, and especially the residents that live here. So I would appreciate if you'd have an ordinance that you could make these boats leave and let them go into a marina and anchor there and drain out their sewage, take care of their trash. Because the trash it's on a regular basis, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, we keep picking up trash. We have to pay somebody to pick up all the trash. And this is also a picture of one of the boats that almost crashed into we wouldn't have gotten away from our bridge, it would have demolished our bridge. Well, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Could you turn in your pictures to the clerk so it'll help support our ordinance? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Mazika. I live at 359 Medallion Boulevard, Madeira Beach. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for moving this proposal forward. I really appreciate this. My husband has worked for 2 years with the EPA and with other agencies to try to get this moving, and I am so happy to see that you are moving forward. There were 2 things that I wanted to find out about the ordinance, and one was to make sure that when the ordinance comes into effect, that none of these boats are grandfathered that are presently here. That would be my first question. And my second question is, when after 72 hours they have to move, do they have to move out of Madeira Beach or just to another resting place within Madeira Beach? Those would be my 2 questions. I totally agree with the Sea Towers people. We have a boat ourselves, which we have in a dock, and we pay taxes for the water underneath that dock. None of these boats out there pay taxes to you. You are losing money. Secondly, there was a boat last summer that had a goat on it. I mean, we reported it to the SPCA. It was just that's cruelty to animals. You know, I don't find it really funny, but I thought it was very cool that in the middle of a summertime, this animal was out there on the back of a boat. And I agree with the generators going all the time. And the other thing you have to watch out for is we have shifting winds all the time. So a boat that anchors perhaps 200 feet off of the shore, you get an easterly wind, and they're right on top of us. You can see right into the boat and see everything. So again, I am really happy, and I really hope that we can enforce this with the Sheriff's Office and the Coast Guard, and thank you very much.
Yeah, my name is Jerry Asher, and I'm also live at the Sea Towers. And my question pertains to the section Division 2, liveaboard vessels and general regulations. And the pages are not numbered, but this would be at the top of page 11, where it has 4 regulations. Starts with all liveaboard vessels. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay. Can I give you a handout?
If you give it to the city clerk, please.
Yeah. I got 5 copies, some photos. I
Well,
wanted
just give them to the city clerk, she'll pass them out. Thank you.
Now, these are the 7 boats that John Apache referred to that are anchored between the American Legion and our Continental Towers building. And the regulation number 4 on that top of page 11 states, this section shall not apply to vessels anchored in the intercoastal waterway or to vessels anchored due to emergency conditions or situations. Now, when you state anchored in the intercoastal waterway, are you referring to those boats?
I haven't seen the picture, but the problem with
The pictures that we got.
the problem with anchoring in the intercoastal waterway, it's supposed to be a throughway, so there's a state law that says that they can't anchor within the intercoastal waterway. We do not have jurisdiction at this time there, but there's a other process that we're looking at of annexing the waterway, so our ordinance will cover that portion, and we have uniform enforcement of the ordinance.
You're saying this ordinance does not cover these boats?
From my understanding, go ahead, you want to?
The state law covers the intercoastal waterway and anchoring in the intercoastal waterway, and then outside the intercoastal waterway, our ordinance would take over. And our city boundary goes to halfway through the intercoastal waterway to the midpoint mark.
All right. The Clean Water Act states that these boats must either have an onboard sewage treatment device or a holding tank to hold that sewage and have it pumped out by either a mobile marine, sewage service boat, or take it to an onshore place that does pump it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
City Manager, could you confirm, too, that we have the pump-out facility at the marina and that I think that it's free for people to use?
Yes, that's correct. We do have a pump-out facility there, and they do not charge.
Do I need to hold the mic?
Yes.
Never moved. That's what I ran out of time. My point I was trying to make.
To be reported to the sheriff, and the sheriff can ticket them currently if they're in the intercoastal waterway. And if they do this ordinance, then we can write them up under this ordinance as well.
We ready? Hi, my name's Sandra Chapetta, and I live at 14th Avenue South in South Pasadena, Florida. But your water issues here are Pinellas County issues. and that I gave the recent SIMS and SWIMS reports from Pinellas County. They monitor your water quality, and the trend is for increasing nutrients, and you also have a problem with fecal contamination. The waterkeeper started monitoring our recreational water quality. It tests below safe levels 50% of the time, and that's not a good trend for Florida, for tourism, or for us to be able to use our shared resources. Nutrients also impact our seagrasses, which clean the water. So it's a mutual process, though the grass gets negatively impacted by these excess nutrients and loss of water clarity, and then you end up with loss of seagrass, and then your water quality spirals down. And once you lose it, it's really hard to save it or stop that downward spiral. And Biscayne Bay has recently lost 90% of their seagrass. They're panicking because they don't know if they're going to be able to stop this spiral. And you don't ever want to get there. Now, it seems like these boats, okay, just here and there, a little bit of sewage dump, but it adds up. And sewage also contains a lot of bacteria pathogens that are highly toxic to us when we paddleboard or we swim or we use our kayaks or jet ski. So you're getting those fecal contaminants in your mouth or in your eyes. You can end up in the hospital. Kids have ended up in the hospital. You know, you can get sick. We're starting to see a trend with the warmer water temperatures that increases a problem with algae blooms from this sewage entering the water. Now, I don't think a lot of people understand that the Coast Guard also regulates these discharges from the boats. So it is a federal law, I'm pretty sure, might be state, that they have to have a lock on their Y valve when they're in coastal waters so that they can't discharge. So you might want to think about adding that into your code and your permitting process here, that they check, and when you get your permit, you're able to see that they've got their lock on their valve. So that's regulation. Anyway, I would highly recommend you make that change. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Stack. I also reside at 4775 Cove Circle. I'm also the secretary of the board of directors of Pinellas Realtor Organization. And as a realtor, when we show property over there, one of the things that the buyers do is look out the window and see, look at the water, look at the pretty boats, look what the pretty boats are doing. So that is an issue. It has not yet begun to affect the value of the properties over there, but it's only a matter of time before that will begin to happen. And then there will be monetary issues that will be a function of these folks and their vacant boats. So please consider moving forward with this regulation and getting a mechanism to enforce it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kathleen Bridge. I am actually one of the liveaboard people. I have been on my boat for 3 years. There's a handful of us that we abide by the regulations. The people that you guys are complaining about, there's just a few people. There's Daryl Pacenza, who is renting these various boats out. The people that live out there, we're having just as many problems as the rest of you are having. I happen to live on the, behind the school. The person that the gentleman from Sea Towers is complaining about that dumps her trash, I had complaints about her when she lived behind the school. She moved her boat over to this side. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out and I've picked up the trash. We complained about her dumping fecal matter 2 years ago, and it's only just now coming to fruition that it is a problem, that she is the one problem. I would hope that you won't punish all of the people, because this has been a community that I've lived in for 3 years on my boat. I do comply with the regulations. I would like to continue my lifestyle. It's not an easy lifestyle. It's not a cheap lifestyle. I had damage on my boat as a result of Irma. I'm doing everything I can to go ahead and resolve my issues. I'm pretty close to having all of my repairs completed. I spend my money here in this community. So I would really like to continue a relationship with this community. And again, I would ask that just because there's a few people, why can't we target those people? Because the community is not the only ones that's having problems with these individuals. So I think that part of the best way to handle it is to go ahead and continue to work on addressing these problems with her and with Daryl Pacenza. That's all I have to say. I really have enjoyed my lifestyle, and again, I'd like to continue to live this lifestyle, and I do it in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Teresa Hibbard, 308 Druid Road West in Clearwater, and you're probably wondering why I'm here this evening. I'm actually a student at Public Policy Administration at St. Pete College, and our course this semester is Policy Leadership, and we are required to find an item on first agenda and do some research and then come and present to you all. So I am also addressing the amendments made to Ordinance 2019-21 regarding the liveaboard vessels. I did have the opportunity to review your televised planning commission, which was very helpful. I would like to compliment you on the technology that you had for that. And the staff indicated how difficult it was to work with the sheriffs in order for them to regulate the issues that you're having. And I just wanted to bring forward in a 2016 Florida Fish and Wildlife Anchoring and Mooring Pilot Program stated that regulating the anchoring of vessels in state waters has been one of much contention for decades. Local governments face legitimate needs to resolve issues with improperly stored, abandoned, and derelict boats. They must also deal with homeowners who dislike vessels anchored in close proximity to their residences and property damage resulting from vessels breaking loose during weather events. These are complex issues for local governments that want to regulate anchoring but have no legal means to do so outside of properly permitted mooring fields. Boaters want to anchor wherever they choose and where may be convenient and inexpensive for them. Governments often need to protect health, safety, and welfare by managing anchoring through regulation. As elected officials, the issues before you this evening encompass all of the items that I just listed. I also know that you have to take into consideration, as you've heard this evening, the positions of residents, boaters, tourists, and the Sheriff's Office as you make your decision. In addition to being eyesores and a danger to the environment, you have identified an opportunity to collaborate with Pinellas County Sheriff's Office by creating consistent codes that is more helpful for our law enforcement. Collaborative leadership is critical in any field. However, in our county, where I have seen a lot of parochialism, I admire and respect your efforts to collaborate with the Sheriff's Office. As an aside, one of our textbooks is all about collaborative leadership. While I do not live in your city, I do care about the beautiful county we are blessed to call home, and I support elected officials and city staff working hard to create regulations to keep us safe and to protect our environment. I recommend and hope that you will move forward with the passing of Ordinance 2019-21, Amendment to the Liveaboard Vessel Code. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
Once again, Mike with the Planning Commission. We did bring this topic up yesterday at our meeting, and with the city manager, what he was talking about, we were going to annex. They would be annexing the waters to us, if I'm not mistaken. We brought this up yesterday so that we can more police what's going on in our backyard waterways. So as the Planning Commission, we did make a recommendation, a motion, that you guys do pass this as written with the changes that they have. I did miss something yesterday, and it's a typo, but it should be intra-coastal, not inter-coastal waterway. So that should be changed. Any questions?
Ray Kerr, 583 Johns Pass Avenue, Madeira Beach. First off, I'd like to applaud the Board of Commissioners and the city staff for taking up the ordinance. It seems like it's well past time. I'm going to continue the regarding the fast boating speeds, which is also part of this ordinance, but is not addressed by this. So one of my questions is if Section 7833 and 7838 are not, if they're not addressed at this time, are there any restrictions to come back to amend this ordinance in the future? Is there any, is there a one-year period before you can come back to this ordinance or not? Now,
If this ordinance was primarily for regulating anchoring and mooring of live-aboard vessels rather than boat speed zones, we could come back at any time and actually establish slow speed or minimum speed zones in order to get them marked, which would require signage in the water. You have to get permits for the signage, and you have to work with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission that has some specific regulations that you would have to meet to be able to show that. The current ordinance has something about 4 miles an hour. That's not how the state does it. They do minimum wake and slow speed. So our current ordinance has some problems already with that section. But we wanted to get this liveaboard part of the ordinance moving first. And then we can come back and
I applaud you for that, but I
start regulating slow speeds and things like that later. They're much more complicated to regulate the speeds of vessels in the waterways than it is. We have this leeway with liveaboard vessels within the city that the statutes allow us to regulate.
That's great.
Establish mooring fields or require liveaboards come to the city marina or to another private marina to be a liveaboard, a permanent liveaboard. So I think the slow speed zones, typically they get challenged a lot too, so it takes some administrative hearings and sometimes court proceedings to defend them. So that's a little bit more complicated, and we're just beginning to put that together now.
Great. I just want to keep it on the city's agenda. That's the purpose of me speaking.
Just because it's hard doesn't mean we're not going to work on it.
All right, I applaud that. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Public comment is now closed.
Make a motion to pass ordinance 2019-21, amendment to liveaboard vessel code, first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Will City Clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Douthat,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hodges,
Yes.
Commissioner Andrews,
Yes.
Mayor Black.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, if I may, for those of you in the audience, we appreciate the fact that you came out to voice your opinion. And the next step, we will be looking at some of the comments that were made and trying to make this the best ordinance we can have. And we'll have it on the agenda for the October meeting for the second reading. I think it's October 8th is that date.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is our staff reports, and the first one is Seafood Festival Parking Plan. Director Hatch, are you here? Thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Director Hatch, for coming up with the chairs.
Thank you again. We don't have to vote on these things, so if you have to, you can't wait, just go. Is that? Oh, yeah, we were watching. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, they'll be gone.
Director Hatch, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. Just wanted to provide you all with an update with the Seafood Fest parking plan. As you all know, per the contract, the city is responsible for maintaining the parking at Johns Pass Park as well as 130th Ave. As done in the past, we're going to utilize the valet parking company for this process. We've kind of looked at the opportunity to utilize this lot, or these two lots for the event. And after the review, the idea would be to continue to use the valet parking company that is operated there. We've used them in the past for our events, and they're very familiar with the Seafood Fest situation as far as the parking. With Johns Pass Park, in terms of safety and the ingress and egress of the folks who attend the event, the bus loop utilizes the Johns Pass Park parking lot. So they pick up at multiple spots throughout the city, and they will drop off at that point and then allow the pedestrians to walk underneath the bridge. They will utilize that park to turn around. Additionally, that is an Uber and basically all ride-share drop-off point as well. So the reason that we chose to valet that lot with this company is they're familiar with that, and they will control the parking as to maintain that all vehicles are parked within the lines necessary. Because if we get one cowboy that decides to go out there and park wherever they want in the spot, whether they're double parked or too far out into the driveway, the buses will not be able to turn around. So utilizing their expertise, operating with the previous event, we'll do that there. And then the plan at 130th is to do the same. They'll have somebody manning the lot for $20 at both lots, but they'll be manning 130th as well, but that will be a self-park. That won't have any sort of turnaround or anything else going on there. The contract with this organization would be directly with the city. In the past, it was with Seafood Festival, but per the contract, again, we're taking control of this lot, these two lots for the event. So we would have directly with them. And then when it boiled down to it, it was a 50-50 split. We did do the plan would be a 50-50 split. We did do a parking analysis that showed the financial numbers capable of this, but there's no guarantee that these numbers, this was just assumptions based off the number of spots and if they were parked once a day, twice a day, just basic projections. Utilizing this parking company, we would not have to commit any sort of staffing to it. The payments would come out of what is earned that day, versus if we had to staff somebody all day long to park at those two lots. As far as utilizing city staff, would be paying out city staff at overtime, as well as benefits, as well as just general, kind of a morale standpoint of having them work an additional event on the weekends. So this really is what is the lowest risk option for us and provides the expertise of somebody that has utilized the event before, or that has worked the event before on behalf of the organization. So just wanted to give you guys an update, see if you had any additional questions or concerns regarding this. Or
What's to stop one of the vendors from parking there all day or all 3 days versus, here's $20, here's $60 for 3 days, and then not turning that spot over at all? What's to stop that?
There's really nothing to stop that. We do know that we are providing free vendor parking here at Winn-Dixie with the shuttle for the event. So they can park here at Winn-Dixie or City Hall, but if they're going to be parking there as a vendor, they're going to have to pay. There's nothing stopping somebody that's attending the event from parking first thing in the morning and staying at Seafood Fest all day. This being the first year that the city's responsible for the parking, I think taking as much risk out of it as possible is what we're trying to do here.
Why aren't we just using the parking meters in our parking department, for monitoring the parking and ticketing and stuff like that? Why are we not doing that?
We discussed that. We're kind of on both sides of the fence. We could have it open at 130th, but at the same time, we would have people circling the lot at 130th versus having a person there actively waving people in, or if it's closed, telling them to keep moving, to keep traffic flow. As far as Johns Pass Park goes, again, I would love to keep them both open and just utilize the meters that we pay for, but Johns Pass Park, the concern there is the public safety and having the buses turn around there, the Uber, the Lyft, and everything else. The rideshare programs and the buses, if we get a vehicle that double parks and we don't have anybody manning that lot, then now we've got a huge issue there that we would have to deal with throughout the weekend. So that would, Johns Pass Park is curbed with it being staffed. As far as 130th, I think we could go either way. I just kind of figured since we're going to have them out there, we might as well have the staff in case they need to pull or whatever else.
Those lots will be identified for handicap also.
Yes, ma'am.
'Cause I know
Actually,
one year we had a hard time with that.
Correct. And actually, in my my analysis, I accounted for 10 handicap spots in each of those
Saw that,
lots.
Yeah. It was just
So-
the markings. A lot of people didn't realize where they were going. And
Yes.
there was some people who were handicapped that kind of lost out on a good parking spot there.
Right, and we have the handicap parking signage as well as event
Okay.
parking signage that
Great.
will help with them.
That's great, thank you.
Oh, hello, Jay. Real quick, what's our plan with residents? Are they paying? Are they? I mean, we have no agreement in our parking passes that we give to them that they can't park for free in our city lots. That's, again, I'm not thrilled with this proposal, and I know it's not on you. This is former bad management from before that this residual came down from. We're gonna have a problem with that. If our name's on this parking lot, we're gonna have problems with the citizens of Madeira Beach wanting to park for free. That's the first thing. Secondly, I am completely thrilled that, as per the original plan, we are not using city staff for this. You've described it very well. It's a very complex situation, and it's not easy to park. As a city manager, I know he's new to this right now, and as I described early on in this process, we are now having to work for the money that the Seafood Festival gave to us. That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. It's better for us to keep away from the liability of all of this and let the Seafood Festival handle it, and then we just get our check for the hard costs and move forward. So, I know where we are where we are, and we got to get through this year. I would just hope that when we start talking about this again, we err on the side of, let's not try to, reinvent the wheel. There's no reason, the Seafood Festival didn't have any interest in saying that, they wanted $8,500 waived. They never asked for that. They did this in order for the parking. So again, I know this isn't on you. I just want to make sure that going forward next year, we're looking at something else. The other thing we need to look at, and I know you and I have had discussions about it, and I had discussions with the city manager as well. The previous rec director had an agreement in place with the Seafood Festival that we would co-partner on the event. We would split costs, we would help man the event and make sure that the logistics are run properly, and, we'd share in all the revenue. And at the end, when we got our big, obviously there'd be some costs to the city, but the net money, we could either create an enterprise fund for Johns Pass that we were pumping money into the beautification of Johns Pass. Maybe we start there. Maybe then we talk about, we're talking about acquiring property at different times during our conversations. We could actually build this fund up and set the parameters of what we're able to use that money for, but the majority of it in the beginning has to go into the beautification of it. We could be great partners with them on this, and we could really designate that as a city event and not a Johns Pass event. And that's really where I'd like to see the future going. I don't know if the people on the board agree with me, but I think that, our signature event, or one of our top 3 signature events in the city, our name should be all over it, and we should be a part of it, and we should be, really, as it gets bigger and bigger as it has, we need to be involved in the logistics of it. That's just my opinion on it. So, but thank you for putting this together. I appreciate it.
Just to take a step back too, we mentioned the city staff and we mentioned the parking company as well. And wanted to let you all know that we did explore, if it was staff and volunteers and all this other stuff, or if it was just volunteers. We do have a cash handling policy in place that says that, at any city event or a situation such as this, that we can't have a volunteer out there doing it themselves. So there would be, even if we had volunteers that were ready to line up to do it, we would still have to assign a city staff member to every one of those parking lots per our cash handling policy, because we need to make sure that we know where the money's going. So having a contract with these guys, we will get the payment. We will get an audited report as well from them. They provide a report of all the parking information because they record everything. Because, just as we like to run things like a business, a parking agency, their boss wants to know that they're getting every dollar that comes in. So if a ticket's missing, or if, money's missing, he tracks every bit of it. And we see these gentlemen, the two leaders of that organization that have been out there. We have seen them typically, we went to a Clearwater baseball game once and went to pay for valet parking, and the owner of the company was out there parking cars himself. So we know how involved they are as far as the money collection and reporting that properly goes.
No more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have adding a 5-year fiscal impact to items submitted to the Board of Commissioners for approval. Director Pierce.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I don't know how this item got started, but I would be very glad and welcome the opportunity starting in October to provide more information in the financial impact area, including cost analysis, and how much what would be the advantage of purchasing products or services at current time versus delaying that. So I would welcome that opportunity to start doing that. Admittedly, I need to do a better job working with the clerk to ensure, and the city manager, ensuring that I am able to review the fiscal impacts that the directors do submit that put on the agenda packets. And hope I can improve on doing that going forward. I also like to take the opportunity to just indicate that we have the second public hearing on the FY 2020 budget, which is on the 17th, which is next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. The advertisement of the millage increase and the budget summary hopefully will be in the paper this Friday, Friday the 13th. But I just want to encourage the same vote that we had last Tuesday, and that each commissioner is well represented here. I will say that the state, if things don't happen the way that they should as far as the vote, the state would cite us for not being in compliance, and they would hold the half-cent sales tax, which is estimated to be $280,000 to the general revenue this coming year. So again, I just want to encourage that we have one more hurdle on the budgets to go next Tuesday.
Thank you, Director Pierce. Next, we have reports and correspondence. Are there any reports or correspondence from the commission? City Attorney?
Nothing at this time. Nothing at this time. I've discussed an item with the city manager, and he's going to bring that up in his report.
Okay, City Manager.
Yes, speaking of the meeting, I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware we do need, as Mr. Pierce said, every vote counts in our vote for the millage rate and the budget. And obviously, there's been a long-planned trip from Commissioner Weinstein, and she agreed before she left to take a phone with her. So we will have audio communications with her. She will be listening in on the discussion and the vote, and we'll be able to legally cast her vote as the city attorney has advised. I just wanted to put it on record that that is the process that we're going through on the 17th.
Okay, thank you very much. There being no further business, we are adjourned at 7:24.